he found that the second bank of the United States was so controlling the economy that it was stifling. We needed that in 1913 when the Federal Reserve was set up, because in that time the transit of money from one place to another was difficult because it could not be sure of the value of the dollar. This type of responsibility is necessary. The dollar must maintain its value, or we cannot know what value to place on it. So the Federal Reserve in that situation is necessary. The situation that developed of people coming up with all kinds of ways to make, quote, make money, derivatives, all these other fancy things, is got to be guided by someone. I have a feeling that the Federal Reserve would be a good choice, but it's got to be taken care of in each of the problems in light of that problem.
Thank you. Paul?
I really appreciate that question. To summarize my views on the Federal Reserve Bank, right here, this button I carry around with me everywhere, End the Fed, is pretty popular with the Tea Party movement, I understand. I fully understood the abuse of power of the Fed back in 1994 when a best-selling book came out called The Creature from Jekyll Island. You should pick it up. It will illuminate you to an unbelievable degree as to how we've been conned by our government. Number one, the Federal Reserve Bank is not federal. There's some that dispute that, whether or not it is. They have way too much control. And one of the things I would do if I was in the U.S. Congress right now is join Congressman Ron Paul in his bill to hold the Federal Reserve Bank accountable. Now, some may say, well, you can't just end it flat out. Well, I understand. Maybe we've got to do it piecemeal. But is there anything so illogical or unreasonable? Is it unreasonable to expect to at least audit the Fed? I do believe they need to be audited. They have way too much power. And since Obama became president of the United States, the power of the Fed has increased exponentially. Something's got to be done about this.
Paul, thank you. Yeah?
And actually, I must confess, I agree to a great extent with what Paul Schiffer said. And Doyle Smith gave me an education as I sat here. So I appreciate that. But I'll tell you what, the bottom line is we keep looking. Let me answer the question. No, I do not support the increase in power for the Federal Reserve. My point, though, is we keep looking at all of these specific areas and figuring out whether or not those are what are causing our economic situation, whether or not those or this entity in the government is causing the devaluation of the American dollar. We keep looking at all of these little specific parts of the government, but where is common sense? The reality is the reason why the economy is suffering, the reason why the value of the American dollar seems to be slipping is because the rest of the world is beginning to doubt whether or not America's wealth is indeed nothing more than on paper. When you see China start to slow the rate at which they purchase our treasury bonds, already owning $800 billion of our deficit, when the Chinese government has become a little scared about purchasing more U.S. treasury bonds because they're not sure we'll be able to honor our obligations, don't you think you and I, as the taxpayer, as one of the American citizens, should also be concerned? Yes, we by no means want to increase the power of the Federal Reserve Bank, but I think there are many other areas where we can focus our attention to get our situation here in the country back in control.
Thank you. Jim?
I'm going to simplify it. I mean, the Federal, let's face it right now, the Federal Reserve, as H.Doyle Smith said, really is necessary to stabilize our monetary policy. So I am in no way in favor of totally disbanding it. I do believe that we need to hold the Federal Reserve accountable. There's no doubt about it. We also need to hold every government institution accountable too. The EPA, the Federal Reserve, you name it, they all need to be held accountable. That's how you get your government under control. You know, do I believe we need to reduce the power of the Federal Reserve? Absolutely. But again, that just gets back to where I've said all along. We need less government. We need less government regulations. We need less government intervention. But a total disbandment of the Federal Reserve today would be extremely dangerous because it does stabilize our monetary policy. but we need to make it have less control.